Hello everyone, and welcome to TDWI's webinar program. Thanks for joining us. My name is Linda Briggs. I'm an editor with TDWI, and I'll be your moderator today. Our webinar is entitled, Applying the Power of AI to Data Catalogs, How Artificial Intelligence Can Make It Easier for Users to Share Knowledge and Collaborate. Our sponsor today is Unifi Software. And for our speakers, first up will be Dave Stoddard with TDWI. After Dave's presentation, we're going to have a product demonstration from the folks at Unifi. So before I turn things over to Dave to get us started, a couple items for the audience. First of all, our webinar will be about an hour long. At the end of the demo, after Dave's presentation and then the product demonstration, we're going to have a question and answer period. So if at any time during any of the presentations you have a question for a speaker, go ahead and type it in there on your console and send it over. Again, we're going to address as many of those as we can toward the end of the hour. If you run into any technical issues during the webinar, there is a help area there below your slide window. You can click on that for suggestions. If you're a Twitter user, we'd love to have you spread the word by discussing this webinar on Twitter. The hashtag to include in your tweets is TDWI. Finally, if you'd like an immediate PDF copy of today's presentation, there is a line for that there on your console. You can download a PDF. In addition, as always, we're recording today's broadcast, and we'll be emailing each of you a link to the archived version of the webinar, so you can view it again later if you choose. Or please feel free to pass that link along to colleagues who may not have been able to make it today. Okay, once again, today's presentation is Applying the Power of AI to Data Catalogs, How Artificial Intelligence Can Make It Easier for Users to Share Knowledge and Collaborate. Our first speaker today is Dave Stoddard. Dave is Senior Director of Research for Business Intelligence here at TDWI. As an analyst, writer, and researcher, Dave has provided thought leadership on key topics in BI, analytics, IT, and information management for over 2 decades. Previously, he headed up his own independent firm and served as VP and Research Director with Ventana Research. He was the founding chief editor of Intelligent Enterprise, a major publication and media site dedicated to the BI and data warehousing communities, and served as editorial director there for 9 years. With TDWI, Dave focuses on providing research-based insights and best practices for organizations implementing BI, analytics, performance management, and related technologies and methods. So Dave, good morning. Let me turn things over to you here.
Hi, Linda, and hello to everyone who's joined us on this webinar. Thank you for doing so. And I think we've got a great topic here today because we're going to combine a lot of things that are very important to organizations and also trending ahead when we're talking about artificial intelligence and how it can contribute to a lot of things that organizations need to do to get more out of their data assets. So let's see here. Let me get my agenda up here. So I'm first going to just kind of lay the setting, I guess you could say, to get the lay of the land and talk about business drivers and how they're top of mind for organizations as they try to improve how they apply data knowledge. And then look at some of the new demands on information management, particularly in the big data era. Talk about data cataloging and talk about how AI contributes to that, and then just offer some closing recommendations. So I think that the key thing here really is know thy data. Business drivers today, they're obviously numerous, but organizations, really for all of them, they're under a lot of pressure. They need to get it together in terms of get their data house in order, term we hear a lot. And about this is really, to get there is they need to know their data. So they need to improve their ability to find data because as they become more diverse and have more diverse data sources, it gets harder to even just find the data and know what you've got, to integrate that data to begin to build some value off of it, and then to manage it as you've got this sort of deluge of data coming in of all different types. And it can get costly if you are not capturing the data's value. I think a lot of organizations today are looking at their even development of data lakes and expansive data warehouses and things like that, and seeing that if they're not capturing enough value, if users aren't being able to access the data and find the data and put it to use for a variety of purposes, it's just a cost. So they also need better efficiency, and this is a coming pressure from both business and IT management. We see this in our research, better efficiency in the flow of the data. How is it moving around the organization? Can it be better? Are there bottlenecks here and there? Areas where doing the same thing over and over again. Can we make it more efficient? And a lot of this is also coming together in the concept of trying to monetize data. Organizations today, really in every industry, are trying to put together data services to improve relationships with partners, to serve customers better, to work even within their own walls in terms of binding together subsidiaries in different departments so that they can work cross-functionally to address objectives that they've got. And so monetizing data is very important nowadays to be able to figure out that outside-in perspective on the data and how that can serve business initiatives. And of course, these really cannot go forward without good knowledge of the data. In fact, many of them really grind to a halt because organizations do not have that knowledge. And then finally, governance and regulatory concerns. Again, in our research, we see this often very either at or near the top of our list of concerns in organizations as they try to assemble their data resources to meet regulatory reporting concerns and just to meet general governance concerns about protecting sensitive data. So we'll talk about that as we go forward. So all of these initiatives demand data discovery. They need, as I mentioned before, be able to find the data, be able to begin to put it together to integrate the data. And this is nowhere more apparent than in just two of these kinds of initiatives or objectives that I have here. Of course, I could list numerous ones, but customer intelligence and engagement and risk management analysis are two areas that we really see a lot in our research that organizations are interested in and are driving a lot of the, I would say, newer and more creative, I guess you could say, needs to find and integrate data and manage it differently than they have in the past. So with customer intelligence and engagement, one of the big things there is really multi-channel. They're with online channels, social media channels, numerous other kinds of customer engagement channels that organizations are pursuing, whether they're direct or indirect. They now have lots of information that is being generated, and they would like to be able to get a customer 360 or an integrated view of all the data that's important to understand either single customers or customer segments, customer in geographies, and that kind of thing. And even trying to get to the idea of an omni-channel experience so that for the customer, it's a seamless experience as they go from one channel to the next. And the engagement works whether they're talking on the phone through a call center, whether they're on the web, whether they're in a store, be able to pull that information together really kind of in real time to serve that customer. And of course, the other side of that coin is how important that would be for marketing and advertising and service to be able to get that kind of view and to understand customers as they move. So that involves a lot of, first, of course, getting the information, finding the information, integrating that information, and then managing it so you can do it again. So you can repeat the processes and refine them over time. And then in a lot of organizations, I think smarter and more savvy, data savvy particularly, executives are realizing that there are no simple answers, just as there are really no simple questions. That really to understand things like profitability and market growth requires answering a lot of different kinds of questions. And particularly in the customer area, you want to know what are your customers doing in terms of why are they leaving, why are they churning, why are they going to competitors? Do we really understand their buying behavior, and are we impacting that in a positive way? So there's a lot of different questions that kind of come together where it may have been one or two questions in the past. Risk and management analysis is kind of similar in this respect in that, again, organizations used to be able to answer or really ask, I guess you could say, simpler questions. Well, now they can see that really it's a very complicated issue in terms of understanding risk, being able to, as a little chart here, being able to assess what it is, identify the risk, analyze that risk, and then take steps to reduce the risk, to control it over time, and transfer the risk so that it's less of an impact in one area. So all these areas take a lot of data and understanding, trying to know what we don't know. And so it's not just that we don't know what we don't know. So understanding the data better to get to those steps. And so I think one thing we're seeing broadly in the industry to try to handle a lot of this is the idea of active systems. And this is where artificial intelligence or AI really comes in strongly to enable this. So passive systems are kind of the more historically understood systems, and really it's not that one is better than the other. It's really, to me, I see them as complementary. Organizations will always have passive systems. It's really that they now need these active systems to complement them and to work in tandem with them. So passive systems, well understood historical reporting, really what goes fed into the data warehouse, a lot of historical systems, data that's stored for or from activity and user activity and application activity, being able to just access it. Here it is, access it, or pull it into systems that you have, load it into systems, use it, and so forth, that respect. Okay, so active systems is really, and again, I have here on just a little chart just to show how we're seeing it really in so many different areas, and all of which are quite interesting, whether we're talking about certainly medical and healthcare. You can go around the whole wheel here and look at all the different kinds of systems that are trying to move towards the idea of being able to have intelligence out in the network, out at the edge, in devices and so forth, to be able to sense change, to as sniffers, to understand activity, what's going on, where is information flowing, who's accessing, things like that, building in algorithms into these systems so that they can act autonomously, that you can build predictive models and statistics into them to look for key patterns and trends that you want to find, anomalies, things that are unexpected, whether they be good or bad. So anyways, smarter systems. And so this has been definitely a jumping off point for AI, for the kind of systems that can work either way. Use rules, use intelligence, and apply that to situations so you can see new situations and compare them to older situations, or do the more kind of bottoms-up approach and build neural networks and tune them as time goes by and as they get smarter and more feed off of more data, so that you can begin to develop a sense of things from that perspective. So we're seeing all this coming together in information management very interestingly, and so I think this is really a very fascinating period we're heading into, is maybe going on the last few years of really picking up steam now, is how AI is going to affect all the things that certainly we at TDWI pay a lot of attention to, whether it be the data warehousing, data lakes, business intelligence, analytics, and so forth. And so new information demands, how can this help? Well, information demands are, how fast can we use data to answer those kind of questions I mentioned before. We're talking about customer intelligence or risk management. Got to do it faster. We need to find out answers in data that we don't know, we've never seen before. We have to support analytics life cycles, the development of models, the testing of the models, rebuilding the models, trying again, a lot of test and learn kind of cycles that go through in life cycles, and where there are a lot of questions being asked and questions upon questions. Are the information management systems that we have designed to do that, or are they more the kind of passive style where everything in some ways often has to be kind of rebuilt with each phase of a cycle? Gathering and using knowledge about the data to provide better answers is now really a focus, but in many organizations it's difficult because a lot of it is fixed in this kind of tribal knowledge. It's not accounted for anywhere. There's no, as I'll be talking about, a data catalog or metadata repository or any kind of system that's effectively capturing a lot of knowledge that is useful for answering, for posing and answering those kinds of questions. It's not captured in any way. And information demands to answer these questions need to be faster, as I mentioned, needs to be reproducible, if nothing else, to understand data lineage and where things came from, and then be able to improve, so continuous improvement cycles. And the use of automation and in many ways AI, the development of algorithms, can help in that area because it can help standardize, make routines that may have been sort of built on this tribal knowledge and just sort of a one-off, make it more repeatable so the organizations can learn from them and improve them and fix errors with them. And then as we get into governance and security, all of this is critical because when there is something that happens, a violation of a rule or a industry or a measure or a standard, there usually has to be a reporting and auditing capability to track back what happened, what's the lineage, what was the decision process, what was the life cycle that went behind and led up to this event. So all of those are kind of new, or I shouldn't maybe necessarily call them new, but certainly acute information management demands that systems need to respond to. The other is that certainly as we get into kind of a more democratized age with information, providing trusted data is critical. As more and more employees in the organization, more managers, more executives, and even frontline employees start to use data to make decisions, they need to be able to access trusted data. And so, again, here a lot of organizations are running into the problem where they don't know enough about their data to even establish trusted data. So they need better ways to establish a way for users to find, access, and use the trusted data sources, the curated data sources, the sources that, or maybe source, that particularly in our research, in most cases we find IT has deemed USDA choice. This is the best data. This is the data that we have carefully evaluated. We've improved it. It's operationalized. It's ready to go. This is the gold standard data. And a lot of organizations really struggle to get to that because their data is so diverse and it's kept in a lot of different areas. So kind of everybody has their own gold standard. It might even be in a spreadsheet or in a departmental data mart or some system there, but it's not universally accessible. And again, for stewardship and governance, this is absolutely critical to have that sense of trusted data so that they can avoid the decay, the loss of value of the data over time, reduce duplications. So again, it's a cost and efficiency issue, but also a governance and security issue if there's a lot of data duplication, and adhering to other standards that are necessary. Helping users choose the right sources. Again, this is a key issue in stewardship in organizations. Well, stewards can't really operate very effectively if they don't even have a trust in the sources or even one source. So the idea of having a resource that can tell you what is the trusted data, where can we find it, is absolutely critical. And in terms of attributes of trusted data, this is something I like to talk about just because it came up in our research and it's interesting to look at. I won't spend a lot of time on it here, but some qualities or attributes of what is trusted data. There's a lot of definitions out there, but here we were able to see in our research around data preparation how to put together, collecting and transforming and working on data for business analytics. What are some of the key issues? And we saw that accuracy, quality, and validity was at the top of the list. That this is where actually most organizations were the most satisfied. Of course, there's always room for improvement in all these areas. Most satisfied really was only about maybe 2/3 of those who we researched or who responded to our research. And so this is again where they're able to not look at just one source, but integrate numerous sources to validate the data, make sure that the data that is moving through pipelines or part of integrated workflows is the best data in terms of accuracy, quality, and so forth. And then some other qualifications, refreshing the data. Is the data up to date? Is it as close to real time as we need it, for example? If they're working with raw data, is it fully transformed? So maybe it's real-time data, but maybe it's not even fully transformed. Users need to know that. And then some other issues, availability for access. Can they find it again? Conformance to data formats, completeness and depth. Is it consistent across data sets? And this is where a lot of profiling and transformation is very important to try to improve that consistency and root out where there may be inconsistencies in the data. We found really kind of only not even halfway satisfaction with this. So there's a lot of room to improve there. And then there were issues like flexibility for ad hoc needs, and actually the least satisfaction was with this level of duplication. So we can see here that that in itself is an issue as it creates a lot of rework in organizations and keeping track of all these duplications and replications in organizations. So some of the challenges that organizations face in trying to produce trusted data. Well, obviously, what would be very helpful is to have a good data catalog sitting in the middle to help you organizations and help you find the trusted data, to combat the data chaos, to manage it better. There's a lot of different definitions of what a data catalog is, and one thing with catalogs and metadata repositories and those kind of things is they often are contained in a lot of these different systems. Like here I have on this chart, well, I think as many of us know, a lot of these systems themselves have their own kind of little data catalogs or ways that they kind of keep track of what they're doing. What's lacking often is really a more enterprise view that kind of can pull it all together. So data catalogs are critical to finding that trusted data. It can help organizations keep an inventory of data assets as users are looking at them, finding them, and beginning to integrate them. It uses a lot of increasingly, as we'll see, AI algorithms to support discovery, to support description of the data, development of metadata about it, organizing it properly, so that a range of users, and that range of users is getting wider and wider, whether it be data scientists, business users, autonomous or automated applications, data services, the kind of monetized services that I was talking about that can begin to use this. So key issues here is, as I mentioned, a lot of these systems are discrete. The smaller systems have their own kind of data, so that metadata, so it needs to be brought together centrally, or at least be able to be viewed and compared so that it's understood. And then the other key point is that as we look out in the industry, a lot of data catalogs out there, but they're not all alike. Some just cover single platforms like a data warehouse, a single BI system. A lot of BI systems have their own kind of data catalogs. There's legacy systems, mainframe systems, where catalogs may have been or have been set up, or data dictionaries, things like that over time, but only applied to that platform. And we see that a lot in a lot of other cases with application systems, operational systems, all these kinds of systems that are keeping some sort of data dictionary, but it's only limited to that platform. So the issue is, can we get to more of an enterprise view? So data catalogs also are critical, really, as they always have been, in the concept of the data pipeline. And we hear a lot about this today. There's, again, a lot of definitions of what is a data pipeline, whether you're looking at it from a data science perspective, the development of analytic models, that kind of analytical life cycle I was talking about, or for other purposes. But in general, and I tried to make the most general kind of chart I could here, it's about moving data from its sources to the consumers. And so it's a framework, it's a set of processes for moving the data from those sources and to where it can generate more value, so that it may come from raw data or other kinds of data sources that are maybe semi or structured, and have to go through that kind of middle engine, the jobs, the preparation, the ETL, the analysis of that data, routing it to where it's supposed to go, a lot of process steps that have to occur at that point. And in the end, the consumers who derive value from it. They can, again, as I mentioned, all the different types of consumers. And so a data catalog is critical at all these stages, really, because it's important as organizations, again, use particularly with active systems to sniff out, find new data sources. They need a data catalog to understand that data source to make sense of it compared to what they already got, and how it measures compared to, say, a gold standard of the data. And then at every step, where there's all kinds of preparation steps that I mentioned, whether the transformation kind of steps, deeper analysis of that data, all these steps can refer to the data, a good data catalog and kind of an enterprise data catalog to improve it. And then even as you get into the data consumers themselves, they're again going to need to be referring to this system sitting in the middle. So as the data pipeline is active and data is moving through, in many cases at a faster and faster rate, they need a system like a data catalog to find the data, to help integrate the data, and to manage it more effectively over time. And it's all very critical for empowering users. As I mentioned before, democratization is rampant in organizations as more and more types of users need to use data to make decisions. And so through the data catalog, they can apply data knowledge, as I mentioned, in all facets of the pipeline, try to do things like, smart, reducing consistency, reduce duplication of effort, use AI algorithms and techniques to gain value from these diverse data sources, and kind of center the knowledge in the data catalog so you can apply it to different kinds of processes, because there will be many in organizations. And a key thing is to uncover hidden data relationships and do it quickly as you get new data sources and look at diverse data to be able to see how this data is related. Is it good data to be integrated, or is it duplicated data, for example? What do we know about this data or aspects of this data already that we can apply to new sources? And so we're seeing through the whole, kind of portfolio of technologies that kind of fall under AI, whether it be machine learning, but also things like natural language processing and search being brought to bear on the use of a data catalog to make it easier to ask questions, to discover answers to those questions, to have the systems be active systems that offer suggestions of different data sources that could be applied. So a different kind of relationship that users will have with the data catalog that is really more around really helping them in every phase of what they're trying to do in terms of looking at data and analyzing the data. So a lot of support for information discovery, development of tools and routines that can create, for example, smarter tagging, better categorization of the data so you start to build that resource over time, address inconsistencies and issues around syntax confusion. AI systems can offer to help human and analysts and automated, of course, to understand where there's differences in syntax and where you're maybe looking at same or similar data. And then finally, to improve collaboration. Once the catalog is there and in place and is being used effectively, it can reduce the number of kind of battles between users as to who has the correct data, because everybody's kind of working off of at least the gold standard understanding of the data catalog and what we know about the data. So just to look at a little bit of our research, we can see the importance of various things. This is from a fairly recent report we did about accelerating the path to value with BI and analytics. And so we can see here that we asked about which of the following data integration, metadata integration, semantic integration technologies does the organization currently use or plan to use to enable users to view or access diverse sources of data for BI and analytics. Well, data integration technology is kind of a catch-all for a lot of different things, whether it could be point-to-point kind of integration. So that's obviously in front and not surprising because a lot of organizations have a lot of that stuff. Sometimes they wish they didn't because a lot of it can be kind of spaghetti code that's hard to maintain, and which is another reason to build these centralized systems. Master data management, 58%. What we can see here is I starred half of organizations either have or are planning to have tools to create and maintain metadata models. Nearly as many data cataloging and glossary development technologies. And then interestingly, we see here about a quarter looking at machine learning technology to discover metadata. So we see in our research that at least a segment of our organizations in our research are already beginning to apply AI and machine learning tools to improve their ability to discover metadata to put together that integrated resource. So I think as we look at our research going forward, we'll see that surely increase. So some of the challenges, just talk about some of those. As I've mentioned, self-service, as great as it is a challenge because it tends to increase the number of silos that are out there, makes it difficult to discover related data sets within and across sources. Tools and applications have to often have their own metadata so that it really becomes an issue. How do you integrate that metadata in a central catalog? And then lineage becomes hard to track because you don't know enough about each of the data sources. So these are some of the issues where, again, a centralized data catalog could be extremely helpful in the expansion of self-service BI and analytics. And also, particularly, as I have here on the chart, our presentation slide, that AI and machine learning can be helpful. Automation, to use it to create automated active discovery of the metadata so you've got a system that doesn't depend on manual effort to find and discover the different metadata and begin to understand how it comes together as a centralized resource. Automating the inventory of the trusted data assets, so what have you actually got, and in a distributed, as is common in most organizations, distributed data kind of scenario, can we inventory the gold standard of the data via the catalog? Discovery data relationships, critical. And then standardize the metadata and track relationships between different systems metadata. So again, getting that kind of global perspective, the enterprise perspective, as BI and analytics become more diverse in organization through self-service. Big data, if we want to identify that as primarily the semi-structured and unstructured new forms of data that is coming into organizations, that's obviously a challenge because the sheer quantity and volume and the speed of it makes it difficult to discover its structure in time for it to be useful, and other metadata characteristics, and difficult to understand the quality and completeness of the data, particularly as data comes flowing into data lakes. That's being a big issue in organizations. It's difficult to use it because they don't know enough about it. They don't know what the quality is, or whether the data is even complete, or whether they can go back and find the sources again to complete the data. So a lot of information lacking in a lot of those kinds of data lake scenarios. And that's one thing that AI and machine learning can be very helpful for, handling the scale and volume as you build algorithms in that are designed to go against very large volumes of data, using things like the natural language processing and search to make it easier to access the catalog and thereby the data, and then building that metadata understanding for the production runs of analytic models and algorithms against data lakes. Because in many cases, we see that the analytic models are ready to go. There's just not enough knowledge about the data to effectively put it into production. So behind all this is really relieving pressure on manual work, and I think that's where in this area particularly the automation, the smarter automation I should say, because there can be a lot of dumb automation, can be so critical. Because organizations can begin to curate that data at scale. They can address the kind of volume that they're seeing to assist data professionals and business subject matter experts to gain knowledge about the data assets. So it's not really just about automating and doing the jobs through automated fashion, but how can that help humans tackle the kind of data sources and the volume and variety and veracity, to use all those V's, that organizations are seing. So AI and deep learning use of neural networks to help rapidly discover the metadata, learn about it over time, what are the attributes, what more can we know about this data is critical and really can't be done at the kind of scale and volume to handle, particularly as organizations move towards real-time analytics and want to put models into production in a real-time fashion, really critical to move towards a more automated fashion. And so self-service, as I mentioned, to help to take some of the pressure off IT, to handle more routine user needs, and then gain that enterprise perspective by being able to look at diverse distributed data sources through an enterprise catalog. I'll talk a little bit about governance here, kind of hit a lot of these points along the way, but cataloging is absolutely critical for governance, and governance is becoming more important in organizations they develop the policy and the rules, but if they can't match that with the knowledge of the data, it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be a very manual effort, and it's going to be really impossible to manage it, particularly over diverse and very large sources. So it's important to have that resource of data knowledge that you would find in a data catalog to support governance. Audits and data lineage, as I've mentioned, it's difficult to do without it, and to be able to reproduce what happened, to say how did we get to this analytical conclusion, and can it be reproduced? This kind of information is critical. Regulatory adherence, the reporting issues around GDPR and so forth have to know the data and have a central resource to know that data. So AI is contributing mightily here to automate a lot of this to improve consistency and provide broader coverage over lots of different sources as it is moving through the data pipelines and able to manage that data pipeline from a governance perspective. So we see again here, interestingly, that in our research, the creation of business metadata and documentation of definitions is at the top of the list in terms of what are the most important data governance objectives that an organization is planning to implement. So we can see here that it's definitely recognized in organizations that they need this resource to move ahead with governance and monitoring sensitive data, all these other missions that we have on here in terms of implementation of regulatory policies and other governance issues. Okay, well, let me close with some quick recommendations. Number one is make the data catalog a keystone. Don't let it wither and die, as it happens in many organizations, because it takes a lot of manual effort in many cases and lacks a lot of business and backing, in particular championing in organizations. So it really should be the keystone as organizations get more diverse and democratize and look at more data sources. It's critical to enabling users to efficiently derive value, and it's important to build that knowledge base about the data so you can have smarter and more repeatable data pipeline processes. Recommendation number two, capture the business benefits of AI and machine learning. And it's certainly active in a lot of other areas, so I think it's well timed to apply it to information management processes such as the development of things like a data catalog or metadata management, those kind of central facilities. So it's critical for dealing with the breadth and scale and breadth of the issues. Automation, improved standardization, allows for continuous improvement because you can then begin to look at the software programs and improve them, and make it easier to work with the catalog, both from a lot of different types of users' perspective by using natural language processing and search. And then the third recommendation, tend to the issues around collaboration, because a lot of organizations, it's really around these information management issues, and particularly not having a resource like a data catalog that is a big issue, a big problem in collaboration, because as I mentioned before, a lot of arguments about who has the right data. So use it here. Smarter data cataloging can reduce confusion and contention about the data. Users can work off the shared resource, and then the AI can help data scientists and users tip the balance away from preparation, which we see in our research often takes up to almost 80% of a data scientist or business user's time, and more time that they can spend on analytics. Okay, well with that I'm going to say thank you very much, and let's take a quick look at, before we move on to give it back to Linda, I know you've been listening to this. I'd like to hear what you guys think in our audience. So what is your biggest challenge in creating and managing an enterprise data catalog? So some of the issues that we see in our research come up: hard to centralize metadata from disparate data silos, so the distributed data problem. It's manual effort in organizations, a lot of slow manual effort. Hard to maintain the catalog and keep it up to date. So often it's set up, but it isn't maintained properly, and so it falls out of date and is not relevant to what users are trying to do. Because it's often cross-functional, executive support, sponsorship, and investment is absolutely critical, but often we see in our research is lacking. And then finally, there's inadequate skills and training to use it properly. All right, so let's see what the results are. Linda, I don't know if you wanted to push the results to...
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, good. Okay, well we can actually see here that at this point, hard to maintain the catalog and keep it up to date is actually nearly 30%. See that as an issue. Often that's because there is a lot of manual effort involved and human oversight that could be helped by AI and automated programs. See here, though, that about a quarter find it hard to centralize metadata off of distributed data, 19% looking at the manual effort issues, and then sponsorship and skills training also as key issues. Okay, well, thank you very much. Linda?
Great job, Dave. Thanks very much. Before I bring in the Unifi folks, let me remind the audience, I see some good questions coming in. We're going to answer as many audience questions as we can at the end of the hour, so if you have a question for Dave or for our speakers from Unifi, go ahead and send it over. Use your console, and we'll get to those as soon as we can. And then on that note, let me turn it over to Unifi Software. Joining us from Unifi is Andy Sheldon. Andy is VP of Marketing at Unifi. So Andy, let you take it away.
Thanks, Linda. I'm going to do a very quick intro of the Unifi self-service data platform and then hand it over to Russ. So Unifi, we've built a suite of self-service tools, including the data catalog and discovery aspect that Dave's just discussed and Russ will demonstrate. We've seamlessly integrated the data prep function. We're not going to see that today as this is a catalog presentation. But the idea of being able to find or discover data that you're interested in, having the AI, OneMind, recommend other data sources that other users have previously selected, or that there is an automatically discovered common key, and offer some preparation. So this might be data cleansing, enrichment, normalization, parsing, transformation or blending of data sets together. And then all of this is wrapped around a number of platform elements, including collaboration, the ability to share insights about data, to get this concept of being able to get crowdsourced data quality improvements and so on. And then the whole governance and security element, this will be something that Russ covers, but who gets access to the data, which data do they get access to, what can they see within those data sources, so mass data at a column level. And then having set up your environment here and what you want to do, being able to create workflow automation so that things can be operationalized, updating incremental data capture from source data, for example, running data transformations, and then feeding the output. All of this is essentially the underpinning of the unified platform. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Russ and let him share his screen and give you a demonstration of the unified data catalog. Introducing Russ Christopher.
Hi everyone, Russell here. I need to share my screen. Linda, perhaps you can help with that. I'm going to end my screen share and then reshare. It looked like it painted for a moment and then stopped. So go ahead and give this a whirl. Today, folks, I'm going to play the part of Anne. And let's try that one more time. Yep, looks like it wants to paint and then kind of gives up the ghost. Entire and share.
Yeah, I saw it for a minute there, Russ, and then it dropped off.
There we go. Maybe Dave is still sharing by some chance his deck?
Yeah, I'm seeing your screen now, Russ.
Okay, so I will go ahead and re-screen share. Linda, let me know when the browser paints, please.
You're not seeing it quite yet. Hang on.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I saw it paint just for a second and then it disappeared again.
Okay, there it is. I'm seeing your screen.
Excellent. All right. So I'm Ann. I'm a business analyst, and I have problems. I have a list of problems, many of which you've seen Dave actually speak to. I'm not going to drill into all of these. And Linda, just let us know if the PowerPoint slide is showing, please.
Will do.
Say again?
Will do. It looks good so far.
Very good. Thank you. I'm a business analyst, very high-powered, great with Tableau, great with Power BI. Dave mentioned Customer 360, for example. I've been presented with a situation where I may have very deep expertise in software like Salesforce, but when I'm presented with an opportunity to deal with something like a Customer 360, I'm going to be, frankly, out of my area of comfort. Someone may want me to build something like this in Tableau, where we're looking at revenue trends across multiple channels, where we're looking at cost of goods across e-commerce and brick and mortar, where we're looking at demographics of our customers, income, age, location, maybe Twitter sentiment. Does that drive customer behavior? And what drives Twitter sentiment? Perhaps it's being able to close support cases relatively quickly for them. I might even want to look at how weather is impacting sales. All of these things I could probably do in Tableau or Click or Power BI, but how do I get the data to come together? So in about 15 minutes, we're going to show you essentially how Anne is able to do that. So I'm logging in to Unify. And again, my place of comfort, as I mentioned, is perhaps a data source like Salesforce. So I'm going to use a Google-like search here, and you can see already, and again, Dave sort of prefaced this, the Unify tool is suggesting things that it thinks I might be interested in. This is powered by our AI, our machine learning. It's a very powerful knowledge graph underneath the covers, and you're going to see it make its appearance sometimes very directly, and sometimes, like right now, sort of indirectly. I'm going to ignore that, and I'm just going to search for Salesforce data. And we're going to see that the data catalog is telling me, well, I have columns of data that has to do with Salesforce. I have metadata. I have data sets. I might take a quick look at the metadata to try and understand, do I trust this data? And this is actually good news for me. As the Salesforce guru, I know that there is a contact table. And if I begin looking at some of the columns or attributes in this table, I can immediately see, okay, I see a description on this, and I can see who the data steward is and the provenance of this data, provenance. It originally came from Salesforce, that this particular field is a custom field that someone plugged into Salesforce after the product was initially spun up. I can also see system-generated metadata. This is actually key because a lot of the systems out there generate lots of useful metadata, and if you're not capturing that and using it and cataloging it and making it available to your users, it's a crime. Now, any of these, by the way, I could add to a little shopping cart of metadata. Let's say I wanted to create an offline data dictionary after the fact. I can do that. In this case, I'm just trying to make sure that I like this data. Do I even want to bring it into Tableau or an analytics tool? So I'm going to look at my data sets. Here's my contact table again. We can see a little bit more information about it, schedules that it's used by. It has 128 columns. And actually here, if I zoom in, it's saying, well, actually, please don't use me. I'm actually based on a web service, and therefore I'm kind of slow. You should use a different version that happens to also be available to you. And I can see that someone has tagged this as staging only. So if I look a little bit further, I see pretty much a duplicate data set here at the bottom, contact HDFS. And if we crack this open, I can see, okay, sure enough, more people are using this in schedules and workflows. It has about half as many columns, so this most likely is curated in some shape or form. Now, Anne being Anne, she's not successful because she goes the easy route. I'm still going to look at the original data set coming directly at Salesforce. So I'll pay a little bit of a penalty in terms of speed because we're literally right now querying Salesforce, getting and sampling data with our machine learning algorithms, and then showing the results. Now, what Anne will see first and foremost is that some of this data is not for me. You can sort of see the purple here. Some of this was marked as PII, and additional information here is masked columns. So someone, either an admin or Unifi does this automatically as well, has decided that these are things that I don't need to see. And this is great for me actually as an analyst because at times I've gotten into trouble, frankly, in the past when PII has leaked into my analytics. Essentially, IT here is protecting me from myself. I know that what I can see is what I should see, and I can leverage it however I want to. Okay, I'm looking at city, the city of my contact right now, and I can see where these users are from. This is actually kind of interesting. I have 20 rows right now that have no city. Now, some sort of an automated data cleanliness, data quality score would probably tell me this field is in terrible shape right now. However, as a human being and an expert on Salesforce, I know that sales guys generally don't fill in all the forms they're supposed to, right? So I know as a human being this is fine. I can see, however, that I'm dealing with 22 unique cities, that none of these cities are invalid, and that the cities that we sampled are 44% unique. And of course, this is all sort of sanitized synthetic data, but that gives you a good feel for what's going on. I can also see all of the columns in this data set. And again, we're always calling out the fields that I need to be careful with. All of the PII columns are always being governed. I'm going to flip into metadata. Dave talked about metadata and how important that is. Metadata really gives your data much more focus. You understand actually what it means. In this case, I have descriptions which can be voted upon. Is this a good field or not a good field for doing analysis? We have the data stored, where it came from, And then again, here's this system-generated data that we're going to pick up from other systems, whether it's a Salesforce or a Marketo or even a column description in a database. Our algorithms just automatically go after that stuff and bring it in. I may want to go deeper as well. For example, here is a field called contact status, and I may want to know, what do these values actually mean, potential values. So I have a business glossary. As Dave mentioned, we want to have a clear definition of what this stuff means before we start talking about the analytics and the data in a meeting. We don't want to argue about that. We want to argue about the numbers. So here I can see exactly what each one of these are. Now, some business groups may disagree with what a qualified versus unqualified lead is based on this definition, and that's okay. We can actually have that conversation right here in the data catalog. So here's the conversation, and I won't get deep into it. It's almost like a soap opera where someone is saying, oh, this data, I don't know, I want to use all of it, not the one that you told me to use. And the data steward is getting in here and sort of explaining why it's not a good idea to do this. Long story short, the data steward finally says, look, just trust me, right? I know this data. It's good stuff. It gets my stamp of approval. Now, as Ann, the data analyst, this is golden, right? Again, a data quality score tells me something, but it doesn't tell me everything. When I get a human being saying this is good, I'm now feeling comfortable with this data. I've found it, I've sampled it, I've tasted it, I've looked at it from a few different directions, and now the community is telling me this is good stuff. If I wanted to join into the conversation, I could just say, you know, hi there, I was just hired, and then I might actually point to one of these fields. And again, you're seeing some of the AI at work. It is suggesting fields that I might want to talk about. And I'll just finish that off. Anyone else who comes in after me can dive right into the conversation and see exactly. Clean up after myself, though, because I'm a good citizen. All right. So David also mentioned related data sets, right? That is a huge challenge when you're trying to bring these various systems together. What is related to what and how? I don't know that as a business analyst. I know my area of expertise. A good data catalog like Unifi takes care of that for me. So it's already suggesting and pointing to some related data sets. Now, not surprisingly, many of these are coming directly out of the Salesforce connection, the Salesforce data source. However, some are not. Here is a reference data source that's sitting out on S3 or Hadoop, individual income statistics. So that tells me at some point, someone did some sort of a data prep job or brought these two things together in an interesting way. Top 1,000 U.S. cities in reference data. I have things like weather data in a JSON file in a different place. So this is sort of pushing me in the right direction, giving me a bird's eye view of what's out there. I'm going to take a look at maybe the opportunities in Salesforce, the actual things that my company is trying to sell to customers. And again, some of this data is not for my eyes, but some of it is. I can see the probability that these deals will close within a certain time frame, or maybe the amount of the actual sales themselves. We're not trying to be Tableau here, but again, I want to get a feel for this data. I want to touch it, make sure it looks about right, and now I think, yes, I'm going to bring this stuff together and bring it into my analytics tool, and it actually is worth doing a deep dive. Now, I'm looking at this data again because I want to learn about it. There is a much more fast, efficient way to do this if you just sort of want to go for the throat. So I've shown you one way people like to consume this. Another way is simply to lean on NLP. I want to ask a question of the data and get an answer. So if I want to know, what is the max of, we were just looking at the amount field, there it is, I can just ask that. And the answer is 20 million. I also see a very direct representation of the knowledge graph that powers Unifi. And we'll talk about this in just a second. I might have, by the way, hundreds of amount columns across the thousands of data sets that I have cataloged in my tool. Am I looking at the right one or not? Well, I can look at all of them in any way that's pleasing to me and see, aha, yep, I am looking at the right amount column. Good. So what are we looking at here? At the highest level, this is tracking, again, everything that people have ever done with data, this particular column in a particular data set, and it's surfacing it to me, security permitting, of course. So I can always lean on the work that other people have done or that the base systems have done on my behalf. In this case, people have filtered this data in different ways, like looking for opportunities that have to do with partners who we work with. Or I also might want to look at functions. This is essentially, it's like a calculated field in Tableau where we've decorated the data, given it more context. I might want to do some advanced profiling. Here we go, get into the data. Or again, if I want a bird's eye view of everything, I might just say, give me all the statistics for the thing that I'm looking at, and I'm about to see every single metric in that data set and information about it. So again, do I even want to do analysis on this? I don't know. Let's go through the data. I might see that, the maximum fiscal year is 2019. I have deals sitting out in 2019 already, and it's only March. Is that a good thing? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So the other thing that we can do is go a little bit old school. Data catalogs like tags. Tags help you find things, help you organize things. So I'm going to look at my data sets here, and I'm simply going to find all the data sets that happen to involve Customer 360 work. And I see data sets in S3. I see file-based data sets in JSON. I see things in Hadoop. I see things in databases. And in fact, I have some Twitter data that is in a database somewhere. I do not have permissions against this. Typically, if I need to actually go out and find the owner of that data source and request access to it, it's not a very pleasant experience. I'm shooting lots of emails to people at minimum, and it takes a while. In a good data catalog, you literally can just say, hey, I want this. I don't know who owns it. I don't know where it lives. I don't care. Just give me. So I've done that. I'll very, very quickly jump in as an administrator so you can get a feel for the way that looks. And pretty much as I log in as an owner of that data set, I'm going to have a notification waiting for me. I can go to that request and I can see, hey, Ann wants the customer tweets data set. I met Ann. She's a new hire this morning in the cafeteria. She seems like good people, so I'm going to go ahead and just accept that request. I'll sign out, get back in as Ann, and essentially what you're going to see when we get back in is that everything that she needs is right there, ready to consume. So at this point, I would typically go to my data sources, go to my data sets, and start stitching together a data prep job to bring all of these things together. There's my Twitter data set. In the interest of time, we're not going to do that. I'm simply going to show you the output of one of them, Ann's awesome data prep job. And we can see the joined data from, in this case, it was 6 to 7 different data sets. I can see the lineage of that data as well. In other words, I understand that this particular field came from the weather data set. It's actually made up of daily precipitation and daily snowfall, and actually it's a function. Someone wrote a little basic case statement here. Or the mailing city came from my Salesforce data. I can also download this, so I might choose to drop this onto my file system as a Tableau Extract or a Tableau workbook, and I can actually open that. If I do something like that, I'm going to have a brand new data set that I can actually just immediately begin using. Now, I'm not going to show you how that works. I think most of you know how the analytical tool of your choice actually works, but there you go. I'm going to show you one more thing from an IT standpoint, Dave mentioned governance quite a bit, and the system that you're seeing thus far tracks everything not only to help users, but to allow me as an administrator to understand what's going on in the system. I've actually pointed, because I'm handy with Tableau, I have pointed Tableau at Unifi. And here, for example, I'm embedding a Tableau dashboard directly into Unifi. We'll do a quick refresh there. And I can see essentially everything that is happening on my system in real time. So we'll go to Object Access. And we'll see that over the last 7 days, people have done things. Let's just look at what people did on the system yesterday. I can see who is logging in, how long they were there, most popular data sets, what were people doing. Here are the individual data set fields that people are touching. Here's someone downloading something and accessing job output. I might also want to just take a quick look at search. What are people searching for, maybe over the last 7 weeks? This is great because I can look for people searching for things potentially that they shouldn't be looking for. And I can also see things that they're looking for like crime data. You're going to see, again, crime data. That's a scary one, employee salary. But crime data might be a data set that I, as an administrator, want to provision for my users. Finally, where is the dangerous stuff, the PII? Here are users on my system. The orange stuff is the PII. Who has access to that PII? I can see it. So in a nutshell, what you see in 15 minutes is a user using the data catalog to find and bring things together, the governance, and then finally a user or an admin coming in and actually making sense of all of that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand back to Andy for Q&A.
Over to you, Linda.
All right, thank you, Russ. Nice job on that. Yeah, let's jump into the Q&A and see if we can get a couple audience questions answered here. Let me see. A lot of questions coming in during the demo, so let me go with this one. So we've got Andy Sheldon back on the line from Unifi to answer these questions. Andy, how about this one? Is it possible to get to know who the most frequent users of a particular data set are? That might be a good way to know who to ask complex questions of about the data set.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. I will just tell you, everybody, that on the call that there's a bunch of questions coming in. We realize we're at the top of the hour. We will answer all of these questions and put them in a blog and send that out to everybody to have that answer. What we have been doing is kind of in real time looking at the questions and having Russ cover some of those. So that particular question you saw in the administration interface, Russ was able to call up the data sets and see which ones were most frequently accessed and by who. Not only is this a value in terms of just kind of figuring out which of your data is more important, it's really a requirement as you think about compliance for auditing access. So who's been looking at what data sources and what have they been doing with it?
That's great. Thanks, Andy. Let me give you a more general question then, and we'll run a little long here to get this answered. Someone's asking, data catalogs ideally support both the warehouse environment and the transactional environment. Can you see how these two very different use cases align in a centralized data catalog?
Yeah, this is a great question. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about all of the different data sources that we connect to, but one of the things, and David can chime in here as well, we're starting to see a sort of stratification of the data catalog providers and tools. You've got sort of data lake catalog tools where, you know, as long as you've got all your data in a data lake, that works great. You've got legacy transactional data warehouse, data mart catalogs. Again, you know, that's great for that aspect if you just want to catalog that. Cloud catalogs, you've got you know, the cloud providers providing a catalog source, the distros providing a catalog tool. And I think what we've been looking at today is what we think of as an enterprise data catalog, where it doesn't really matter where your data is, what structure it's in, what environment it is in, we can connect to it. I think we're connecting now to over 100 different data sources with different connectors. And so the idea is that you, by connecting to all of those different systems, you're creating, and no pun intended, a truly unified data catalog, which lets you find everything wherever it is, and you leave the data where it is. You don't have to move the data to catalog it. You're essentially creating a virtual data layer on top of all your data in order to have that catalog. And this provides the advantage. If you go the more sort of dedicated catalog for specific things, like your transactional database, like your S3 buckets and so on, you run the risk of sort of setting up a catalog of catalogs problem where your business users have to know where your data is before they can go to the appropriate catalog to look at it. I think that's just going to end up being a very cumbersome way of trying to find how you empower your business users or your users in general to kind of find the data that they want and really leverage the information that's most important to them across the enterprise.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. On that note, we really are out of time here, so let's go ahead and close out. I want to thank our speakers today. That was Russ Christopher and Andy Sheldon joining us from Unifi, and our own Dave Stoddard with TDWI. Thanks again to Unifi for sponsoring today's webinar. We do appreciate that. I want to remind everyone we did record the webinar. We'll be sending you a link to the archive, so you can click on that and watch it again or pass that link on to colleagues. And then finally, I want to remind everyone that TDWI offers the latest research, reports, webinars, and information on BI, data warehousing, and analytics, and a host of related topics. I encourage you to tap into all of that expertise. It's at tdwi.org. And on that note, from all of us here today, thank you very much for attending. This concludes today's webinar.